All right, boys, you ready for a spicy one? So a lot of you guys probably know who Andrew Tate is. Pretty big influencer. Says a lot of things that I agree with. I've been pretty open about that. He's very pro masculinity. He's very much about being competitive and bettering yourself, which are messages I absolutely vibe with. I don't agree with absolutely everything he says, but I agree with more of what he says than what I disagree, at least from the things I've heard. Well, obviously, recently he was taken in by police. I've heard detained, I've heard arrested. I think he's just detained, but again, he's being held still, so he might as well be arrested. I don't know. I don't really know how Romanian law works, so forgive me on that. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I don't know anyone involved in this case personally, and obviously, this is an ongoing case, so everything I say is subject to change, in theory, right? But I think the allegations against Andrew Tate are complete and total bullshit for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously, I believe in innocent until proven guilty. I always have and I always will. And number two, the claims that have been made, to me, don't even seem like real claims. For several reasons. So first off, at the beginning, everything is vague, and a lot of it still is vague. No real, actual concrete claims have been made. But a lot of the things that have been said aren't, big things. So for instance, I watch Timcast IRL, which is Tim Pool's podcast, right? I do watch that occasionally, and he had Eliza Blue on, who is someone who I've always had my reservations against. Some of the things she says kind of puts me off and feels a bit off, like she might be full of shit. And she did a press release, supposedly from the victims of the Tate brothers, right? Saying that, reading their statements, right? There were several issues with these statements that I have. Issue number one is they were very vague and didn't make any actual claims. Issue number two, they wanted to remain anonymous. So again, an anonymous claim to me means nothing. I understand wanting to remain anonymous in certain cases, but I think that when you make an anonymous claim, it can't be taken as seriously because it's not a real claim. Anyone could do that. I could call up and make an anonymous claim to somebody about something. You know what I mean? It doesn't work like that. It's ridiculous. And number three, the claims they're making don't even sound that bad. So at least from the small things they are implying, and again, maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but the claims that she read imply that he made them love him, and then they were willing to be in his cam business, which, by the way, he's talked about his cam business plenty of times. He used to run a webcam business with a few girls. They'd go out and do cam stuff, and it would make money, and that was what they would do. But none of the statements have implied any element of force or threats or anything like that. All of them have just said that he made them love him. And then they use this concept of coercion, which I think is bullshit, at the very least overplayed, where they just don't want to take accountability for the fact that they made a choice and regret it. They say, oh, well, he manipulated me. Well, do you not have free will? Are you not an adult? Obviously, if these were children, that would be different, and obviously that's not any of the claims that have been made. And obviously, if there were threats or force involved, that would be different, which, again, as far as I can tell, are not any of the claims that have been made. But the problem is women don't like to take accountability for their actions. They just don't. So they regret something. They come back later and say, oh, I didn't like this, therefore it's bad. That happens all the time. You know that women can get out of prenups by claiming it was under duress? You know that, look, there's never been any accountability for them in society. All of the stuff is they're propped up and said that they're victims, and then they're given special treatment in pretty much every case. Woman gets pregnant. If she wants to kill the baby, no one else has a choice, right? And it doesn't matter that she made the choice to have sex. And, granted, this is discounting cases of rape, because obviously that is different, and I hate it when people make that disingenuous argument. That's not what I'm talking about here. Still wouldn't be right either way, to kill the baby. But that's a whole other argument. But the fact that women don't like to take responsibility for their own choices has been pretty apparent for, ever. They'll make a choice, and they'll suffer the consequences for it, and then they'll get to just say, I'm a victim. This Eliza Blue chick has been one that I've always had kind of reservations about. And it just kind of, it was a frustrating episode to sit through. I did sit through the whole thing, by the way. It was frustrating, but I did. To me, what it seems like is these chicks who were in his cam business regret it, and now we're saying that they're somehow a victim, which to me is bullshit, because if you agree to do something as an adult, if you agree, you have the free will to make that decision, And if you're saying that's not the case, then you're telling me that women don't have the capability to make their own decisions, which is sexist on you if you're saying that. And that's coming from me. If someone makes a decision, they make a fucking decision. That's the end of story. Women not having copability has been a problem forever. If two people get drunk and have sex, no matter what, the guy's going to be the one that gets in trouble if one of them gets in trouble, even if they're both completely shit-faced. And to act like just because someone took some convincing to do something means that they didn't have a choice in the end is ridiculous to me. Basically, every time anyone has ever had sex, ever, there has been some element of convincing involved. Not to mention the fact that women use sex as a bargaining chip all the time. They're like, if you do this for me, I'll have sex with you. Happens all the fucking time. They will use that as a bargaining chip. But if a guy does the opposite and says, if I do this, will you have sex with me? That's somehow seen as bad. Again, I don't see the logic between the two. Another thing is, like, it goes into, like, the whole idea of coercion, I think, is bullshit, too. Like, it also goes into, like, Hollywood, right? Obviously, there's a lot of shitty people in Hollywood. There's a lot of rapists and pedophiles and things like that. But the problem is, some people will pair that with a chick who agreed to suck cock for a movie role. Like, granted, that's a scummy thing, but you still agreed to suck cock for a movie role. Like, you agreed to it. Like, not all of them do. And the ones that are forced into it, absolutely, that's awful. And obviously the ones who made those bargains in the first place, kind of scummy. But, at the end of the day, if you're telling me that you don't think a woman has the capability to make decisions for herself like that, then women don't deserve rights. If that's the argument you're making. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm arguing women are capable of making decisions. Especially given the laws we have now. Why on God's green earth would a woman making a choice lead to it being someone else's fault? Like, granted, there can be things where multiple people are culpable and things, sure. But to say that somehow because you agreed to do something, you're now a victim because you regret it, is just being a fucking childish person who doesn't know how to deal with your own problems, like your own choices, your own consequences of your actions. Bitches do this shit all the time. Now that said, as I said, I don't know all the details in this case because it's still ongoing, and there could certainly be a thing later that proves me wrong, and if there is, there is. But right now, I am firmly convinced that Andrew Tate did nothing wrong. He maybe did some things that were a bit shady. Like I said, you could argue that it's kind of a dick move to do stuff like that. But to me, it doesn't seem like something that should be considered a crime. Because if he didn't force anyone into anything, and he didn't, like, threaten them, like, with anything, then, to me, there's no issue. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of it. In fact, I think it's a terrible idea. I don't think you should do stuff like that. I don't think you should run cam businesses like that. Because this kind of shit can happen because women are unpredictable and dangerous. Not to mention, it is kind of toying with people, which I'm not going to pretend it's not. But at the end of the day, it's not like you're forcing them to be there. Like I said, if he was, that's different. But as far as I can tell, he wasn't. But yeah, I like Andrew Tate. And obviously there is bias in favor of him on my part. I'll admit that and I'll acknowledge that. But just based on the claims I've seen, based on the lack of evidence I've seen, I don't think he did anything wrong at this point. I think that a lot of the shit is overblown. I think that there's a lot of false information out there. And I think that the idea that if what they're actually claiming is, we made videos for him, and we didn't like it, well then why'd you do it? Like, if he forced them, that's different. But again, that is not what they're claiming, at least in the statements that were read that I saw. And then Eliza Blue made her own statement, too, saying that it was going to be this big bombshell that would convince the naysayers, which it wasn't. It was a bunch of nonsense, just using vague terms and being very accusatory without actually saying anything. I don't know why she agreed to go on a 2-hour podcast when the vast majority of the time she's like, well, I can't say anything about that. And also, she kept saying she believes all the survivors that go to her, but then also claims she believes in due process. It's like, how can you believe in both? How can you believe everyone who comes to you with a claim? That's ridiculous to me. When a claim comes to you, you should be neutral about it. Especially if you're in the legal system. I don't know what exactly her position is. She says she's an advocate. I don't know if she's like a lawyer. Somehow I don't see her being a lawyer, but maybe she is. I haven't looked into exactly what her position is, but she's advocating, so maybe she is a lawyer. I don't know if she is. I don't think she should have a law degree. But I've never liked that, and I hate how people act like, again, I hate the term human trafficking getting devalued when it's such a real and dangerous problem. And, like, she kept making comparisons to Epstein, who actually had women held captive and children held captive, acting like this is the same thing, which it's fucking not. Like, chicks regretting being in a webcam business is not the same as women and children being held in slavery by the global elite. They are very different things. Another thing she kept doing was trying to put herself on the same level with Luke Radowski, who's one of the people on the Timcast, because she kept using terms like Luke and I. Like, Luke and I have been saying this for a long time. Like, oh, Luke and I just tuned out when you said that. Like, she kept trying to put herself on his level, which she absolutely is not. And she said that, like, yo, Andrew Tate isn't saying anything that people haven't been saying for years. It's like, the thing is him talking out against the elite is good. And when anyone else does it, people like that are like, yeah, for sure. But then, if there's any controversy around someone like this, they're like, oh, well, he hasn't been saying anything no one else has been saying. Okay. Well, that's not even true. Because, again, Andrew Tate is much more ballsy when it comes to talking about gender roles. He says things without any care about it. He's very he'll just say what he thinks. And I respect that. There's a lot of people that are cowards, especially when it comes to women. Talking about female nature is something that will get you in a lot of controversy nowadays. And Andrew Tate just does it. Look, men and women are different. We have different proclivities and inclinations. We are different people. And Andrew Tate acknowledges that and talks about that. Like I said, there are certain things of his that I disagree with, but for the most part, he makes a hell of a lot of sense. And a lot of people also don't realize some of the things he says are also jokes and played up. Like, there's times where it's very clear that he's joking, and there's times, like, it's pretty easy to tell. Like, that one where he's talking about, oh, you come in with a machete and stuff like that. Like, that's obviously a joke. But people just don't get it because they're stupid. Or they choose not to get it because they want to think something bad about him. Because he says things that they don't like. I am so fucking sick and tired of women acting like they have no choice or decision or accountability. When literally, they are the ones who are the gatekeepers to sex. That women control men all the time. Women manipulate men into doing stuff with the promise of sex as a reward, or the threat of a divorce, or the threat of breaking up. Women are manipulative all the fucking time, and we don't call that coercion. And like Eliza Blue, like, Tim even brought up, like, he's like, if a guy flies a woman out to work somewhere, and he says, this is your job, you gotta sit at, like, I don't remember the exact thing. Basically, he said, they come out, they're told they're doing one job, turns out they have to, like, clean up a place, and that wasn't what the description was. Is that coercion? And she said no. But if it's sex stuff, then yes. Which, okay, how is it coercion in one instance but not the other? Both would be coercive if you're trying to be consistent with that logic. Because again, in neither situation was there force implied. It was just like, okay, well, if you refuse, then goodbye. Both cases were the same, it's just one was sexual. And granted, I acknowledge that they are different things, sex and work, but to have this idea in your head that choice just goes out the window is ridiculous to me. Like, when you have free will, you still make choices. It's fucking retarded to me, and I'm sick and tired of it. But yeah, I don't think Andrew Tate did anything wrong at this point. Like I said, still ongoing. We'll see about that. Anyway, there you go, guys. This one's going to be spicy. Have a good one. Doodles.